morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to talk about breaking money silence. I'm Michelle Kakamas, Director of Marketing at Heritage Financial, and I'm proud to introduce you to our very special guest speaker, Kathleen Burns-Kingsbury. But before I formally introduce Kathleen, I want to mention a few items. First, a word on today's topic. You may recall that earlier this year, Heritage Financial launched a very important initiative called Her Heritage. Our goal was to celebrate the natural tendencies that make women ideal investors. Things like risk aversion, attention to detail, our ability to handle complex issues, and multitask while also thinking big picture. Things that famed investor Warren Buffett agrees are essential to good long-term investing. But we also wanted to solidify a commitment to helping women build confidence around creating a strong financial future, because confidence is one area that women often lack when it comes to dealing with finances. Bringing women together in community for events like today's are one way that we feel we can help to educate and build confidence. So all of us at Heritage, men and women alike, are excited for this discussion and honored that you have joined us in on this conversation. Second, I just want to mention a few logistical items before Kathleen digs in. If you have a question, please type it into the chat. Kathleen will be answering questions from the chat towards the end of the event. Out of respect for your time, we will stick to our scheduled end of the event at noon. If entered questions in the chat that Kathleen didn't get to at that point, no worries, she will follow up directly with you. With that as background, I'm excited to introduce you to Kathleen Burns-Kingsbury. Kathleen is the founder of KBK Wealth Connection, the host of the Breaking Money Silence podcast, and is an international published author and speaker. Breaking Money Silence, How to Shatter Money Taboos, Talk More Openly About Finances, and Live a Richer Life is her 5th book. She was named one of 9 amazing conference speakers in 2017 by Investment News and is a sought-after keynote speaker, consultant, and coach on the topic of women and wealth. Her mission is to empower women, couples, and families to shatter money taboos and communicate more effectively about financial matters. Kathleen, thank you very much for joining us today. Let's get into breaking money silence.
Thank you so much. It's exciting to be here, even if we have to be here virtually. And I want to thank Heritage and all of you who took time out of your busy schedule to be here today. We are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is breaking money silence across generations. And so today we will talk a little bit about why talking about money, especially with loved ones, can be so complicated and why it's especially complex for women. But most importantly, I'll be offering tips and tools and tactics for you to engage in conversations across generations, whether this is engaging an adult child in a conversation about inheritance, or talking to your romantic partner about money, or even engaging in a conversation with your advisor that might be a little bit more emotionally based. So to get started, I wanted to share with you a quote. Now, this quote is something that you would think was from the turn of the century, right? Money is the oil that greases the wheel of society, but oil is filthy, sticky stuff, and we should clean our hands of it before coming out in polite society. Now, often when I'm in a live audience, I have people guess, like, when was this actually published? And believe it or not, it was in a style and etiquette guide in 2001. Now, if you are a millennial, you may think 2001 was forever ago. But I am a Gen Xer on the cusp of being a boomer. And so if you're in one of those generations, you probably think, oh, that seems like almost yesterday. Either way, what this quote really speaks to is the fact that we live in a culture of money shame. And this money shame actually goes across generations. And it impacts women as well as men, as well as people who identify in a variety of different ways. And so when I'm talking about shame, shame is different than you've done something bad. Shame means you actually feel like you are bad because you're not good with money. So here are some key statistics that show you how the culture of money shame hits us in different groups. So first we'll look at women, because this is a women's seminar, and thanks to all the male allies that might have joined in today. 61% of women would rather talk about their own death than talk about money with a friend. Now, you may be in the 39% that doesn't feel this way, or you may be in that 61%. This was a recent survey, and I think what it really highlighted is how often it's much more complicated for women to engage in money conversations than men. And we'll be talking a little bit more about why that is in a minute. But when we look at generations, right, you look at Gen X, boomers, put them together, and what you find is that 74% of this group are embarrassed or regret sharing a financial mistake. Now, a healthy relationship with money is not 100% perfect. There's an ebb, there's a flow, and sometimes people make mistakes. And so the fact that we feel so embarrassed about it speaks to that money shame. Now, often people will say to me, well, what about millennials and Gen Zs? They're all set. They talk about everything. But in fact, 84% of millennials surveyed said that they would hide their restaurant expenses with their financial advisor. And why would someone not share that information with a financial advisor who is tasked to help them? Because there is that money shame that you're going to be judged or somehow be seen as wrong. When in fact, how you decide to spend, gift, invest, and save your money is really up to you. So we live in this culture of money shame. And ultimately, what I decided a couple of years ago in doing the work that I've been doing for almost 2 decades now is that we really needed to break money silence, that we needed to let go of this culture of money shame, that it's really one of the last taboos out there that we're not talking about as openly and honestly as we could. And so before I get into why it hurts us so much to not talk about money openly and honestly, let me just define what money silence is so we all are on an even playing field. Money silence is that uncomfortable feeling that many of us get, in fact, almost half of Americans get when talking about money with a loved one. Money silence is something that is not just about the technical aspects. It's not just about the dollars and cents. It's really about our feelings, our dreams, our goals, our mistakes, all that uncomfortable feelings that we sometimes get when we're talking about money. Now, for many of you on today's webinar, you may say, Kathleen, I'm pretty good at talking about money. Or if you happen to be one of the financial advisors, you're probably like, I do that all day. Well, what I have found presenting to advisors and professionals, as well as a variety of women and men about this topic, is that even if there's certain areas where you're comfortable breaking money silence, there's often little pockets where it's uncomfortable. And so one of the things I talk a lot about, and won't too much today, but is about negotiation and salary negotiation. So if I asked everybody on the line to share their salary, if you're still working or if you had worked in the past, what your salary was, my guess is a lot of people would feel uncomfortable with that. So there are pockets maybe where you need to focus on breaking money silence. So just so we know that it's the emotional side of money, and we're talking about engaging in meaningful conversations to be able to pass on our values, our goals, our dreams to the next generation, or to help the generation before us take care of themselves as they age. And so there's a high price for all of us, our society, as well as for individuals and families in not breaking money silence. So here are just a few. So 44% of adults would keep a money secret from their partner. And I think generationally, this may be shifting a little bit. But if you think about that, that's almost half of Americans would actually keep a secret from a romantic partner, but they'll talk about everything else. And we know that one of the contributing factors at a very high level to divorce is financial conflict. We often just don't have a role model for how to talk about these things. 2/3 of affluent Americans, and in this study, affluent was defined as 3 million in investable assets and up, but affluent Americans have not talked to their children about their inheritance and never will. So there's that discomfort in talking across generations. And often that comes from just not growing up with role models on how to do it. And certainly there is a high price for not preparing the next generation to talk about wealth. And that 60% of families fail to pass or transfer wealth across generations. And when you look at the statistics, what you find it is that the 60% is not due to technical aspects. It's not due to the numbers or the contracts or how it's written in your will. It's really about family communication and trust. And so there is a really high price for society, for individuals, and for families. And so there's also an especially high price for women. And so when we think about why is there a higher price for women, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I really think that it has to do with there's a double-edged sword in our society about being a woman and being profit motivated or proactively being financially literate. There's a lot out there about we should be financially literate. I know that Heritage is committed to helping all women and their partners and their families really take care of their financial lives. But there tends to be a blowback or a pushback for women that I think is different than men. So what are the statistics that are out there? When you look at entrepreneurial women who are going to a bank to get a loan, right? So they're business owners, they get 33% less loan approvals than men do. Often this is due to unconscious bias and the belief that women are running businesses as hobbies or not as seriously as men. And what the research shows is that it's actually women view risk a little bit differently and tend to come into their banker sooner in their business development process. So while they're looking not serious, they are just as serious, but ultimately receive less funding. 40% of breadwinners, so people who are the primary breadwinners in their home, actually play down that role in their family. And when you look at a female breadwinner, which by the way, I think it's the latest stat is 44% of women are female breadwinners for their home. And a certain percentage of that, 25, 30% are affluent women who are female breadwinners. But it's kind of sad that a large chunk of those women who work really hard and have great earning potential and take care of their families feel like they have to squash their earning status because of this mixed message in our society that somehow, even though we have made such great advances, that there's a conflictual feeling about women that have financial power and what that means about her romantic partner. And then, of course, the wage gap. I'm smiling, but I'm not smiling. When you collectively put together the amount women lose annually to the gender wage gap, it's $500 billion. So we have great economic power as women, but we face this discrimination and we actually pay a high price for not proactively talking about money and taking care of ourselves and our families, in our businesses, in our careers. But there is an opportunity. And so today, I'm not just going to be a Debbie Downer. I'm going to talk to you about this opportunity because it excites me. And the opportunity to break money silence is real. The good news is the next generation, right? So millennials agree with this statement. 71% of them agree with this statement, that our society basically would be healthier if people felt more comfortable talking about finances. So if such a large majority of millennials feel this way, I feel like the tide is turning and we just need to give people skills of all generations to be able to engage in these conversations because there's a desire, but there's not always a knowledge in how to go about doing that. I think the other opportunity, and this is going to sound a little weird maybe, but we've all been through 14 months of this pandemic. We are slowly coming out on the other side. But what ends up happening when you are in a crisis, and I think, while each of us experienced the pandemic differently, it certainly made a lot of us question our goals, what was important to us. We kind of gained clarity in this shutdown as to what was important to us. And so with crisis often comes this opportunity of change. And I have a quote up here by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you're familiar with him and his work, but he wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was a concentration camp survivor. And he really talked about that when you can't control anything else, right? When we can no longer control our situation, we can control ourselves. And what he talks about in that book, and I think it's applicable, although I'm not making a direct comparison to what we've been through to certainly a concentration camp, but we have been in this pandemic where we've been able to control less of our lives. And so what ends up happening, you get clear, and often you get motivated to pivot and try new things. You may have experienced that in your life, or you may be showing up to this seminar thinking, you know what, this is something I might not have done 15 months ago. And so there's an opportunity because the millennials want to talk about money. There's an opportunity because I think all of us are in a position where we're talking more about the emotions and finance. And so I really, truly believe it is time to break your money silence and to talk and engage in conversations that initially may seem scary for some or feel very taboo given how you were raised or grew up or the society and time you grew up in. But ultimately, when I find people break money silence, what happens that's so cool is that people feel closer. There's a greater sense of intimacy. It actually can be fun. And I find that I have some of the best conversations with people since I wrote the book, How to Breaking Money Silence, when I break money silence with them. So I'm going to pause here for a minute because we're going to transition. We are going to transition into a more tactical oriented presentation where I'm going to want a little bit of your involvement because I believe whether we're virtual or not, we can interact. So if you don't know where your chat feature is, you're going to want to take a look for that. In a couple of slides, we're going to use that chat feature to communicate a bit. So if it's time to break money silence, then it comes down to, well, how am I going to go about doing that? And if you look historically at what has happened in the past, often people will say, well, if you knew more about finances, if you had more knowledge about finances, then you could talk about finances. True for some of us, but not for everybody. And often the tactics that I recommend are really based in the world of money psychology. And so I'm going to run you through 3 tactics that I use with my coaching clients. I use when I train advisors, when I do seminars like this, and I use in my own life because I think that they provide a useful, less threatening way to engage in a money conversation and to get the ball rolling. So the first tactic is identifying your money talk mindset. And in a minute, I will tell you exactly what that is. The second is to explore key influencers. And these key influencers are, all the things that come in and affect how we think and feel and believe about engaging in these wealth conversations. And then lastly, it's practicing. One of the things that I think happens is if you are in a situation, whether you're in a field, whether you're in a family, whether, it's just you're somebody that's talked about money your whole life, you get more and more opportunities to build up that muscle. But if you have grown up in a family that didn't talk about money or felt it was rude, or you and your partnership haven't kind of figured out how to do that, then of course you need practice. The other thing I'm going to say about practice is if you look at the history of women and money and you look back, it was really the 70s and 80s when we started to get into the workforce and started to earn our own money and were able to really invest and manage our own wealth. And so we aren't, as practiced as maybe some of our male counterparts. Okay. So what is a money talk mindset? A money talk mindset is a set of thoughts and beliefs that impact how you think and feel about engaging in a wealth conversation. So mindset in general is really just a set of beliefs. So you can have your money mindset, which is a general mindset about money, wealth, the purpose of wealth, and then a subset of that. I broke that down a little bit further into what's your money talk mindset. And so why should we identify our thoughts and beliefs about money and engaging in these conversations? Because if you look at how human beings process things and how we are, how feelings come and how we ultimately, act around money, what you will find is that how you think, your thoughts, impact how you feel and then impact how you behave. So for instance, if I say talking about money with a friend is super fun, if that's my thought, then my emotions are going to be like, yay, I can't wait to talk about money with my friend. And my behavior is to engage in that conversation. But if my thoughts are, oh, every time couples talk about money, they fight, then I'm going to feel anxious and uncomfortable and conflictual. I may even avoid financial advising meetings with my partner because I don't want to feel that. And then my outcome is I engage in less conversations with my partner. I don't attend meetings. So our thoughts are pretty powerful. I think the last thing I'm going to say before I'm going to give you an experience of tapping into your money talk mindset is that often these thoughts reside in our unconscious mind. So this exercise is to help just kind of bring to the surface those thoughts and beliefs you might have. Because if you live in a society that doesn't talk about money, if you came from a family that doesn't talk about money, if you happen to be a woman and there's mixed messages about talking about money, chances are you haven't consciously thought about your money talk mindset. So I'm going to give you an experience that's going to help you start to tap into this. And just know we are just scratching the surface on the seminar today. But if you wanted to drill down a little bit deeper, that is a place where you could actually, as a follow-up, go into your advisor, talk about the money talk mindset exercise, and see if they were able to kind of continue this with you. So here's how it works. There is no right or wrong money talk mindset. There is just your money talk mindset in this moment. The beauty of virtual, the upside is I'm going to have you do this exercise quietly to yourself. It's probably going to take a minute, maybe two. And then we're going to share via chat, but only people that want to share and talk a little bit about this exercise using the chat. The other thing to know, other than your money talk mindset isn't right or wrong, know that it was formed between the ages of 5 and 15. So often our thoughts and beliefs are childlike and simplistic because we developed these thoughts and beliefs by observing our parents, our significant caregivers, and watching them engage in conversations or not engage in conversations about money. So I am going to read off the next, there's 5 statements, and I'm going to read each one. And depending on where you are, I'm old school, so I would just jot down my automatic responses. You don't put anything in the chat yet. So I want you just to complete these sentences with whatever comes to mind, knowing this is only for you. So don't try to think of it as a right answer. Don't think, what are other people going to think? You'll get the most out of it if you just respond. And I encourage anybody who are professionals on the line to do it as well. Okay, so the first statement that I want you to complete is talking about money with loved ones is. What pops in your mind? Put that down on a piece of paper or note that, or if you're using a tablet, put it somewhere where you can keep a record of it. Talking about money with a loved one is. Talking to my adult children about money is. Now, if you are an adult child attending and you want to change this to talking to my parents about money is, you can. Talking to my adult children about money is. The financial topic I find the most difficult to discuss is. Conversely, the financial topic I find the easiest to discuss is. And I know I'm going quick, I'm doing it on purpose. The biggest fear I have when it comes to money conversations or money talk is. The biggest fear I have when it comes to money talk is. Now, you may want to go back to this later. You might want to explore this a little bit. But the reason we go so quick is these are automatic thoughts and beliefs. These aren't things that you think about and ponder for too long, because then you're going to get those honest, unconscious, or maybe slightly conscious responses. So as you look over the list of what you just realized about yourself, or maybe just validated that you already knew, I want you to think a little bit about how you think your money talk mindset impacts your conversations with other people. It could be an adult child, it could be a parent, it could be your advisor, your partner, a friend, your niece, your nephew. And so what I would like to do, and I'm going to do it at the same time you are doing it, I am going to open up the chat feature so I can see your responses. And oops, hang on. I would love for people to write, let's do this. The financial topic you find most difficult to discuss is. Just write that in the chat, and I will just read some of them without your name. So you can do it individually to me, you can do it to everyone. What's the most difficult conversation for you? Just know it's going to vary for different people. So we have budgeting. Oh, budgeting. How to split expenses. That's an interesting one. Debt, setting goals, the exact amount of money that will be inherited, investing, the fact that I'm not earning the same as my partner, salary and worth, big one, debt and budgeting, investments, income inequality. So there's some trends here. Thank you very much. You can kind of keep them coming, but there's some trends in some of what we're talking about. But it's also, as you note, different, because for another person, the easiest conversation could be budgeting, and the hardest conversation could be something else. I just want to include this other one. Why, when we as parents have money, when we won't give it up to the kids. So I guess I would say that's a kind of a saying no to a kid, or talking about a situation about money with an adult child. All complicated, great, rich money conversations. I think the other thing I would like to have you do in the chat, and thank you for doing that, is just very quickly, just let's look at the reverse. What's the easiest money conversation for you? Retirement. Budgeting. See, I knew that was going to happen. Estate planning, school costs, investing, expense planning, talking with a spouse, saving. Isn't it interesting that some of the hard ones for some are the easiest for others? Not being generous enough with our money. So there's a lot of different thoughts. What is important, and what I want you to take away from this quick exercise, is that we have different thoughts and beliefs. They're not wrong. They usually are based on our family history with money, the family money messages we grew up with, whether they were overt or covert. In other words, they weren't said, but it's kind of like an elephant in the room. We all knew what the messages were. And it also has to do with our experience engaging in these conversations. Lastly, some conversations are just tricky. And that's where having a money coach, or having an advisor, or having somebody who is a little bit less emotionally connected to the conversation can be really, really helpful. So thank you so much for interacting a little bit. And we will kind of continue that in the Q&A. So with your money mindset as a background, what you can do is you actually can do this exercise with a spouse, an adult child. You can bring it to your advisor. It's a great way to start to have a conversation about talking about money. So it's a little less threatening. It's really about, nobody has a right or wrong mindset. So it's not about pointing fingers and saying that's a wrong mindset. It's about opening the dialogue around money conversations, and why it can be so tricky for us to engage in these dialogues, because everybody showed up today because there's a desire to do it. There's a great desire, but often it's tricky. And the other thing is that you need to think about, and this is tactic 2, you need to think about not only your family history around money, but there are many other key influencers that influence each and every person's relationship with money. And I am convinced, and I would say 100% sure, that not everybody has the same money mindset. You may have some similarities, but as you see, there are all these different key influencers: culture and race, gender identity, generation that you were born into, your religion or your spiritual practices, your socioeconomic class from when you were born, right? And for some of you, you may have gone into a higher economic class, and that transition can also be pivotal and really influence your mindset. And significant money events. And when I say significant money events, it's not just big stuff like, you inherited $10 million or you won the lottery. It can be relatively small stuff, but it's big to our mindset. So I worked with one woman around salary and negotiation, and she was really stuck. She was very, very afraid to ask for more money from her employer. And we eventually drilled down to this story, which was a significant money event for her. She discovered in our work that she, as a 12-year-old girl, was babysitting for a family. They had like 3 kids. She started off babysitting with them. And as she got older, she decided, wait a second, this is a lot of work. I'd like to ask for a $1 raise. So she asked the family for a $1 raise, and they didn't give it to her, and they never hired her again. She didn't think about it much until we did this exploratory work around her relationship with money. And then she realized, oh, every time I think about asking for a raise from my boss, I feel like that adolescent girl who's going to be rejected. So just keep in mind that these money events can be significant to us in our psyche, but they don't have to be huge. And so let me give you an example from a woman that I interviewed on my podcast, Breaking Money Silence. Let me give you an example of how these key influencers influence somebody. And then later on, I would encourage you to have a dialogue with someone in your life about these key influencers. Or if you prefer, or in a situation where maybe you're alone, you can be reflective on these key influencers. So this woman on the screen, her name is Lauren. She is a wonderful colleague. And so she came on the podcast, and we talked about what people assume about Lauren when they see her versus the fact that she is made up of all these different intersectionalities. In other words, all these different key influencers come together and influence how she thinks and feels about money. And so she has had an experience of going to an investment advisor early on in her life, not at Heritage, where she felt like she walked into the room and was immediately judged as young, Black, and maybe not that serious about money. And so that negative experience really got to her. And so when we were talking about what that advisor or what she has learned over time that could be done differently, we talked about these key influencers. So I asked Lauren about culture and race. I said, okay, tell me a little bit about the culture you were born in and what race you identify with. She goes, well, I'm African American. I was raised in a very poor neighborhood, and we didn't have a lot of resources. And she goes, in my culture, both in terms of where I lived and in my family, there was money secrecy. We didn't have any, so we didn't talk about it, but it wasn't something that you addressed. And I said, well, how about your gender? And she goes, well, I'm a female and I identify as female. I'm in a heterosexual relationship. And I feel like sometimes when people view me, they see Black woman and they underestimate my ability in terms of my smarts, my financial understanding, and make some assumptions about me that aren't true. In fact, she talked a little bit about how she married a white doctor and how that can get translated into some uncomfortable situations where people assume, oh, she just married for the money. She married up, when in fact, she is a wealth creator in her own right. We talked a little bit about her generation. She's a member of the millennial generation. And she said, when it comes to work and it comes to earning money, there's a lot of myths about millennials. And she goes, the thing that bothers me the most is this idea that we're entitled and we're lazy and we're not that serious about our careers. She goes, actually, I have worked really hard in my career. And she goes, I am a really hard worker. I am far from lazy. And I said, well, is there anything about your generation and some of the things we talk about with millennial generations that does fit? And she goes, I'm really very digitally savvy and I believe in technology. So in her business, she uses a great deal of technology, and she really credits that to being from the millennial generation. We touched upon religion and spirituality. She was raised as a Christian. She gave 10% growing up to the church, even though they had very little. And she says, as an adult, I don't practice the religion the same way I did when I was growing up as a kid, but I believe in spirituality and I put aside 10% for the causes I believe in. So she kind of carried that forward. And I said, well, what about your social economic status? And she said, well, as I told you, I was raised in a really poor neighborhood. Dad was on disability, had a chronic illness. Mom worked, but was often laid off. And she goes, what was really hard is that in high school, I became an elite athlete. And I actually went off and participated in the Olympics. And so I don't know if any of you would recognize her, but this is Lauren Williams. She is the first woman to win an Olympic medal in both the summer and winter games. She was track and field and she was bobsled, which I think is so cool. And so what ended up happening for her is she went from this lower income situation to earning six figures, to eventually having more wealth, sponsorships, deals, things like that. And she goes, I had no roadmap for how to do that. So that transition from a lower economic status to a higher one was really bumpy for her. And ultimately, Lauren, while she's a great competitor, retired and became a financial advisor specifically for women and men in her situation, because she knows that that transition from social class can be hard. It can be hard the other way as well. But we don't talk about the transition to more wealth as much as we should. And so when we got to significant money event, she said, primarily it's that significant money event of making a lot of money, looking at my family and no one having the knowledge. She ultimately ended up working with a really good financial advisor who didn't view her as just one-dimensional, understood all these key influencers to her relationship with money, and then went on to be in the field herself. But I offer this case study because I think it's so rich, and a lot of us make automatic assumptions about ourselves, about other people, about our advisors. But when we start to dig in deeper, it gets really interesting, our relationship with money and all these key influencers. Well, I can't see all of you like I could see you in a room. My guess is each of us, even if we look similar and on paper might be similar, if we went through this exercise together, would see how multidimensional our relationship with money is. So the first tactic is money talk mindsets, identifying that so you can engage in a money conversation and understand what's hard and where you might need to work. Also engage in a conversation that's less threatening with someone. The second is to engage in a conversation about key influencers, whether that's your advisor or someone in your family, or even just doing that work yourself. And the last is the practice. We need to practice money conversations. And it's interesting because I was doing a women's seminar, way back when we were still in person. And it was women business owners. And we were sitting in a room and there were two gentlemen that showed up. It was like for some women's business network and they were sponsors. And so one woman said, you know what? Men get to practice talking about money all the time. It's not fair. And so I said to the two gentlemen, which, speaking of not fair, this probably wasn't 100% fair, but I said, I know you don't represent all of the men out there. I said, but tell me, do you think talking about money is easier as a man? And they said, in some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. So practicing money talk, I think, is an equal opportunity. It's for the men in those room, in that example, they talked about how guys will talk about investments, sometimes in the, playing golf, investments, that kind of stereotypical way. But if they're losing money or they've made a money mistake, they don't say a peep. So I think we all need to practice engaging in these conversations. And so I have provided Heritage, I believe, and if I haven't, I will get it for them, a tip sheet on how to talk about money. Now, there are 7 rules that I've come up with, or guidelines I prefer, and it really is about engaging in an effective conversation, which when we're talking about money, which can be emotional, can be a little bit hard. So I actually use this in my own life. And I actually use this with my coaching clients. So if say you're a couple and you're engaged in a conversation, it is important, instead of saying, you don't want to leave any money to my stepkids, to say, I feel really hurt when we talk about the inheritance, and it seems as if you don't want to leave money to my kids, but you want to leave money to your kids. So the I statement has just a different feel to it. So when in doubt, really try to frame anything from your perspective, because you are an expert on you. You're not an expert on the other person. Another tip I want to provide, and this one I am terrible at. I continue to try to grow in this area. My husband helps me a little, but it's not to mind read. So mind reading is when you jump and make assumptions about the person you're talking to. So the longer you've been in a relationship, the longer you've been a parent to a kid, the longer you've been a kid of a parent, the longer you've worked with an advisor, whatever it might be, we start to make assumptions about, oh yeah, our brain goes, oh yeah, I've had this conversation before. I know what's next. And we start to mind read. The dilemma with that is whoever's on the other side of that, that doesn't feel very good to be told what you think. And trust me, it is an area that I do, and I really try to pull back with my husband, Brian. And it also, it doesn't allow us to be curious about the other person's experience. So if you catch yourself mind reading, really try to get curious. Say, you know what? I don't know anything. Act like it's a brand new person you've never met and be curious about their experience. Curiosity, I think, is the key to a healthy money conversation. And the last tip that I'll highlight out of the 7 is to agree to disagree. I mean, it's a myth that we're going to have a money conversation and somehow a good money conversation, we agree on everything, and an ineffective money conversation, we don't. The truth of the matter is an effective money conversation is one in which the two parties, if there's two parties, if there's more, if it's a family, but come to a mutual understanding. They understand where the other person is coming from. It doesn't mean you agree on everything. It would be really unusual if you agreed on everything, if both parties were being honest. So when you practice money talk, pick somebody who's less threatening to start with, somebody that you feel like you have a good relationship, or you can role model with a financial advisor how to do this, and then start to broaden your circle. Because I find over time, it's like building up a muscle right at the gym. Over time, it gets stronger. The thing I have provided to your advisors or at Heritage, if you're not currently a client at Heritage, is something called the Legacy Questionnaire. So this is a questionnaire that I offer to you just as a little gift to help engage in a money conversation across generations. And what you will see when you receive this document is it is 2 pages. It's very simple, but what it helps you do is start to think about for yourself. And if you're in partnership, you and your partner would fill it out separately. But to start to think about, what are the family values that I want to pass down to the next generation? What's our success story around money? We often focus on what's not working. Let's focus on what is working. And then really thinking about, if you have a business, succession business plans, if you want to gift or be charitable, what that's going to look like. And certainly, whether we like it or not, we're all aging. So thinking about, how we want to be cared for as we age. So it is a brief questionnaire. You can fill it out, bring it to an advisor. You could fill it out, share a blank copy with someone that you want to have a conversation with. If it's your partner, that partner fills it out, and then you kind of powwow and engage in a conversation and then think about the next steps to the next generation. Or it may be that just doing the questionnaire just helps you get clarity. So if this is useful, please take it, use it. Don't, you can recreate it. I just want people to start to break money silence around these important conversations across generations. And so today, I want to leave you with 2 thoughts. One is that when you are engaging in a money conversation, one of the things we need to let go of is this idea that we can do it perfectly. And so it is important to practice, and it's important to be compassionate with yourself. And research shows that women often take less risks than men when it comes to not 100% knowing what they're doing. And this has been repeated time and time again. So it's really important that you break that trend and you just practice. And every practice you say, well, good for me, I practiced. And you don't worry about perfection. Now, it is a hot summer day up here in Vermont where I am located. So you may wonder why there is a picture of some woman in snow, but that is me. And I am practicing, and I certainly am not showing perfection. Any of you who are skiers will relate to this story, or anybody who's trying a new sport. I am an alpine skier. I'm a pretty good alpine skier, and I can get down anything. But this winter, with what was going on with the pandemic, we decided to try backcountry skiing. So backcountry skiing is a little bit of a different setup where your heel, so a boot, your heel is locked in downhill skiing, and backcountry skiing, the heel comes up. It's just a different skiing technique. And so as you can see, I was a work in progress because it's a very different thing to go down a hill with your heel locked in versus your heel up and down. And so when I felt like this in the past, if I was going to be hard on myself and a perfectionist, I would have got really mad at myself. But instead, I just started to giggle. My husband actually, before he picked me up, took this picture, which frustrated me at the time, but now I love it because it really shows this whole thing of it's just getting out there. It's just trying to have a money conversation, or in this case, just trying to backcountry ski. Next year, I'll be out there again, and hopefully I'll be able to get over this little hill without doing a head plant. So that's what I wish for all of you, to practice and don't get so caught up in perfection. The other thing I want to leave you with before we open it to Q&A is I want you to join the Breaking Money Silence revolution. When I wrote the book, Breaking Money Silence, what I decided at the end of the book, my call to action was we should have a grassroots revolution, where if everybody dared to have one money conversation they wouldn't have had prior to reading the book or seeing a seminar by me, eventually there'd be a ripple effect and it would break money silence. I've offered 3 different tactics for you today. Grab on to the 1 or 2 that serve you, or it may be those aren't going to work for you, but maybe you can listen to a podcast and share that with a friend, or you can read the book, Breaking Money Silence, or you can take an online course. There's certainly my courses as well as other people's courses. And if you go to breakingmoneysilence.com, you will see some of the offerings that I have. But ultimately, however you do it, I want you to dare to break money silence, to do it for you, to do it for whatever the next generation looks like, whether you're a parent or an aunt, or whether you are somebody who is mentoring the next generation. Because if we dare to break money silence, we could live in a better world. You're going to get an action sheet. We're not going to fill it out now, but it's going to go through exactly what's the one action around daring to break money silence you want to do, and how you go about implementing that. You want to commit to change, and you want to take small, doable steps. And so please join the Breaking Money Silence revolution with me, because I truly believe if women could talk more openly and honestly about money, families would be better off, the gender wage gap would move towards closing, and our society and the next generation would be healthier. So thank you so much for listening today. I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle for Q&A and answer any of your questions that are there. And I'm going to also open my chat.
Thank you so much, Kathleen.
You're welcome. I don't know if there's any questions that have popped in yet. Remember that if you want to ask a question, you can put it in chat. And I think, Michelle, you are going to help moderate this, correct?
Sure. Yep. I see them in the chat. So the one question is, what are some initial questions to ask when you want to start the conversation?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is when we want to break money silence, often it's been on our mind for a while, and it may not have been on your conversational partner's mind. So often what I will encourage people to do is say, hey, and you can blame me, right? I attended this really great seminar sponsored by Heritage, and we talked about engaging in taboo topics around money. Have you ever thought of talking about money? Like, do you think it's taboo? So it may be just starting with what does the other person think about engaging in this conversation? Would you be open to having this conversation? And I encourage people, if your conversation partner is already ready, start with the money talk mindset. The reason is you can't really argue about mindsets. It's not about spending, saving, gifting, investing, where we're so quick to, me included, to kind of judge someone for their different behaviors. That if you really start with how somebody thinks and feels about money and thinks and feels about money conversations, that often opens the door to what might be next. And the last thing I'll say before we go to the next question is, if you try, or you feel like you want to try, but you feel stuck, that is where someone, a financial advisor, a financial planner, someone like myself can really help just give you a different perspective and really build up that muscle. But often you can do it without that type of support initially.
Okay, that's wonderful. For the next question, it's about protecting your future. So it says, what if you planned all the right things, but the worst case happens all at once? Divorce, disability, job loss, and long-term disability insurance is denied. Any quick advice how to pull up those bootstraps and try to rebuild?
Wow. First of all, that is very hard. Very hard. So I think, one of the things to know, and I don't know if this was in my intro, is I have 15 years of being a therapist. I'm a recovered therapist. So my first thing would be to feel that, And then the second thing would be to be compassionate to yourself. I do find that often with money, these things can happen and it's nobody's fault. Just situations happen. And so you feel the feelings while you're also trying to be compassionate to yourself. I think the other two things I would say is this is a great time to get support of an advisor, of somebody who can help you look at what are the avenues or what are the roads for recovering from a setback. And also, I think it's important to, when you're ready, look, not all of them at once, but look back and say, is there anything in how I handled my relationship with money that may be a contributing factor? Now, notice I didn't say that made this my fault, because when stuff happens, we have to look at, is there anything we can contribute? What can I learn from this so I can change it going forward? And very quickly, my situation was very different, and I'm not making this your situation at all. But the way I got into the field of money psychology was my husband and I lost I think it was $60,000 building an addition on our house because our contractor just abandoned the property. And so that was just one thing. So you have many things. But what initially happened was when I could finally feel the feelings and become compassionate to myself and, by the way, my partner, then I started to look at what are the pieces that I need to do differently. I was already very financially literate, but I needed to understand my money psychology a little bit more and how I ended up here in this situation, not talking about money with my partner and not advocating for myself in this situation. And so for you, it's kind of a similar thing, but take a small piece at a time and definitely get support. I think this is a time that you need to not be silent about what's going on.
Great. Another question that actually came in during the registration process was, I'd like to talk about money with my kids, but I find that the only conversations we have are about them asking for money. Do you have any advice?
I'm laughing. I actually don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and let me just tell you, they can be the same. I think when it comes to whether it's teens, whether it's younger kids, whether it's even adult children, if you haven't had this conversation, I always encourage people to look for teachable moments. So instead of sitting down and having like, okay, we're going to have a money conversation, I would look for times where maybe money's coming up. Maybe it's them asking for money. So I actually recently did a podcast on this with another money expert. And so what we talked about was the idea of, if somebody asks you for money, instead of saying yes right away or saying no right away, it's a teachable moment. What would it be like if I didn't give you the money? How might you get the money if you didn't get it from me? And you kind of talk through these things. Now that can be a little charged, I know, but you can do something like that. And ultimately then you get to decide, am I still going to give the money, or I'm not going to give the money? Or maybe I'm going to do matching. Like, okay, it's $50 to go to this concert. I'll give you 25 if you work for 25. So there's all different ways to kind of engage and make that a teachable moment. What I would say in general with younger people is, if they're listening to a song and there's the word money or rich or something in it, ask them, what do you think the message is in this song about money? And engage in a conversation about the messages that we get about money, the messages we get about wealth, celebrity, whatever the case may be. It may be a TV show. It may be they get their first job and they're negotiating a salary. So often, if you can relate it to their life in the moment, because the nature developmentally of kids is they're going to be pretty narcissistic for a while, that can help them then engage in that conversation. And you might even, and I think I should know this for sure, but I think this is in the book, Breaking Money Silence. I'm pretty sure that there's a chart. And what I encourage parents to do is, prior to these teachable moments, think about what teachable moments might be possible. Not that you're going to bring them up in that order, but then you have them in your awareness. So all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're watching a show and something comes up about money and you go, oh, this is one of those teachable moments. And you're kind of prepared to jump in. So yeah, the last thing I will say about kids, depending on their ages, there's a great book called Raising Financially Fit Kids. And it's from when kids are little, all the way up through graduating college, and they extended it to like 26. So from like 5 to 26. It's a beautiful book, great ideas. That's another resource.
Thank you. I'm going to make a note of that for my 5-year-old.
Excellent. That's a great age to start talking about money, when they're little.
Yes. And then the last question, we are approaching noon. The last question that came in was, what is the best way to start a dialogue about working on breaking money silence with my financial advisor?
So again, you could say that you attended this and that, here was your key takeaways, and you'd like to, here's what the seminar was about, and here is what your takeaways were. And I'm wondering if we can, and just engage in a dialogue that way. The other thing you could do is ask your advisor, do you ever talk about values? Do you ever help couples or families or individuals engage in money conversations? And if that's a service you provide, I'd like to explore that. Some advisors will say yes. Some advisors will not have that service, so they might refer that out. But it often is a great way of letting your advisor know that you are open to these dialogues. Because I think that there is a disconnect, because again, I do a lot with advisors, I do a lot with clients, that often advisors fear bringing it up because they don't want to talk about a taboo topic or upset their advisor. And clients fear bringing it up because they feel like, well, I don't know if my advisor talks about this. And so someone needs to take that risk of saying, hey, I would really like to talk about the money talk taboo and how it plays out in my life. And whether that's the client, or, ideally it would be the advisor. But I would just encourage you to do it that way and then see the response. Often advisors have a lot to say or a lot of questions about this when you open the door.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kathleen. We are closing in on noon, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So we are going to wrap up this amazing webinar with just a few parting comments. First, on behalf of all of us at Heritage Financial, I just want to thank you, Kathleen, for a really powerful discussion about this important topic. What you shared with us is gold in terms of helping women take action to break the silence around money talk and feeling more confident in taking responsibility for their financial future.
You're welcome.
Second, we're going to be sending everyone that registered an email with a link to a recording of today's session and the various handouts that Kathleen mentioned. I want to encourage everyone to set aside some time to take action, to use the worksheet that Kathleen talked about, and determine some actions that you want to take after today's session. Don't let too much time pass by. It's fresh. You can get moving today. And third, as we close the webinar, you'll see a survey pop up on your screen. It's very brief, and we would love to get your feedback on the presentation and any suggestions you have about our events in general. We will be giving away 2 copies of Kathleen's book. So if you are interested, please make sure you provide your email address when you fill out the survey, and we will enter you into the drawing. And lastly, stay tuned for more Her Heritage events geared towards supporting women and building confidence around money and investing. We will be taking a break from events over the next few months as we all get outdoors and enjoy the summer, but we'll also be working on getting some new ideas ready for the fall. And we will continue to provide resources on our website and blog. So please make sure you are subscribed. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of the day.